But thank you very much for the introduction, and also thanks to the organizers of today's conference, the artistic councils from the 5 Nordic countries. And I think you brought together here both an impressive lineup of speakers, but I can see also a very impressive crowd of participants here. And it is, for me, a privilege to be here, not only because I can recognize familiar faces among the audience, but also I look forward to our discussion and also to take a few questions when we have made our opening remarks. I think it was the English poet, journalist and literary critic G.K. Chesterton, who once said that culture, like science, is no protection against demons. And this somewhat pessimistic assessment of human nature might often be merited, but I will try today to use facts and reason today in order to protect us against one particularly demon that have haunted the issue of culture and free trade. The demon that I will like to put to rest is the fear in some circles that a future free trade agreement between the European Union and the United States will somehow deliver a death blow to Europe's creative industries and cultural diversity. Critics are claiming that cutthroat competition unleashed by a free trade agreement will allow Hollywood and American media giants to gradually kill off European filmmakers and undermine public service, TV and radio in Europe. They fear that existing programs and national subsidies in place to support cultural diversity and artistic production will disappear because of this agreement. Europe will surrender to American pressure, and our famous cultural exception will be terminated once and for all, according to the critics. And let me just underline right away that the critics are wrong and that such fears are unfounded. A free trade agreement between EU and the US will not have negative consequences for Europe's creative industries. The EU will not abandon the cultural exception within its audiovisual politics, and the EU will not shy away from protecting and promoting cultural diversity. And let me explain why, because it is important. Last year, on the 14th of June, the EU Council of Ministers adopted the mandate for the European Commission on how the Commission should conduct the free trade negotiations with the US. The mandate describes in clear and specific terms what the EU wants to achieve in the negotiations, which areas the agreement should cover, and how the negotiations should proceed. It was my predecessor, Pia Olsen Dyhr, who represented Denmark in the meeting. And it is no secret that this meeting was long, it was difficult, it lasted 12 hours, and it required a lot of diplomatic maneuvering. The outcome of the meeting, however, was very clear with regard to the audiovisual sector. The EU Council of Ministers decided that this sector will be excluded from the agreement with the US. It will simply not be covered by the agreement, and consequently, the Commission is not authorized to negotiate anything with the Americans related to the audiovisual sector. This is how matters stand, and if things were to change during the long negotiation process now ahead of us, then it would require consensus among the 28 EU member states, and also, in fact, had to be accepted by the European Parliament. And given how sensitive and important the exception of audiovisual sectors is for some EU member states, I don't see this happening. I can think of at least one member state, and I can tell you the capital starts with a P, that would categorically object to changing the mandate in this direction. And the capital of this member state begins, again, with P. I think you guessed it, and I, in fact, also totally agree in this way of seeing things. So I would like to confront the demon about free trade and culture head on by stressing that this agreement will not threaten European culture. The programs and subsidies in place to support Europe's creative industries will not be abolished or negatively affected by the agreement. This is the situation today. That is also the reason why I'm reluctant to speculate about what the possible consequences might be for Europe's cultural industries in the event that culture was included in the agreement eventually. It is simply too speculative. What is less speculative, however, are the likely economic consequences of an ambitious agreement between the EU and the US. And, well, I know, seen from an artistic way or angle, economics are perhaps not the most important thing in the world, but still, this is what creates the background for also supporting the cultural sector and, in fact, financing a strong welfare society, which I think we all claim to in the Nordic countries. So when it comes to the economic consequences, a study done for the Commission predicts that an ambitious deal with EU and the US would increase the size of European economy with around 120 billion euros, corresponding to amount 0.5% of the GDP. And that is, in fact, a lot. It also predicts that wages, both those of skilled and those of unskilled workers, will almost likely rise with around the same amount as a result of an ambitious agreement. Finally, we as consumers will all experience cheaper products and greater variety. For Denmark specifically, the US market constitutes our largest export outside the EU. A Danish consultancy group has recently calculated that Danish exports to the US would increase by 14%, which corresponds to 14 billion Danish kroner, which is also quite a lot. And for all European countries, our economies are based on exports. For Denmark, every fourth job is depending on our exports, and that's why this is so important and agreement. So in short, there are many positive effects from a good trade agreement across the Atlantic. Economic gains, however, it is not the whole story. There are other positive consequences that I think deserve to be mentioned as well. An ambitious free trade agreement between Europe and the US would also give a significant boost to transatlantic relations in a time when we are struggling on both sides of the Atlantic to keep up with rising powers in Asia, South America, and beyond. And also when it comes to handling these conflicts that are arising now, both in Europe but also in the Middle East. It was the American scholar Joseph Nye, who back in the 19th invented the phrase soft power in international politics. Nye defined the term as the ability of states to influence other states, not by the size of their armed forces, but by being role models in political stability, economic prosperity, and cultural excellence. For many years, soft power has been Europe's strong suit. You could call it a comparative advantage for Europe. And although it might be an oversimplified cliche that Europeans are from Venus and Americans are from Mars, it is not far off the mark when we compare Europe's military spending with that of the US. The US spends much more on the military than all the EU countries together, also when it comes to these expenditures that are in fact spent in Europe. Therefore, there's little doubt in my mind that we need to take active measures to preserve Europe's attractiveness in a globalized world. If we want Europe to remain a global partner capable of influencing decision makers also in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and New Delhi, we must preserve our soft power. And our soft power is founded on high standards of living and economic prosperity. Western governments are often criticized for not doing enough to raise global standards in some of the areas from which we derive of much of our soft power. Areas such as sustainable development, global labor rights, or fighting climate change. Such criticisms may sometimes be warranted also, although Western companies and governments are by far the most progressive in these areas. The TTIP offers a chance for the EU and the US to commit each other even more on this agenda, fighting climate change or preventing the use of child labor. Indeed, a whole chapter of TTIP addressing exactly such issues is now being drafted. It's my hope that we can recommit each other to do more in these areas and that we can set a precedent for what other countries, also those less concerned with such issues than us, and this should include in future trade agreements. For these reasons as well, it is of strategic importance for the EU and for countries on the European continent that we manage to conclude a free trade agreement with the US. So, ladies and gentlemen, with so many producers and distributors of cultural content in this room today, I would also like, of course, to take the opportunity, as I also started up, in acknowledging the important role that you play when it comes to the economy in Denmark and other Nordic countries. Alone in Denmark, roughly 85,000 people are employed in the creative industries, and there is a turnover here in Denmark that is more than 200 billion Danish kroner. And I'm aware the different, the significant differences that exist between the various areas in the sector when you call it all the creative industries. And I know that some industries are still struggling to regain the sales and profitability which they enjoyed before the global financial crisis in 2008. But I am very encouraged with the positive trend in these numbers now, which are bettering since the low point in 2009. And I also hope that the trend is continuing when more recent numbers become available soon. So your work is not only valued and respected by millions of fans worldwide who flock to the cinemas to watch our movies and other cultural products, reading our books, it simply delivers an important contribution to the Danish and to the economy also in the other Nordic countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this will be enough from me for now. I look forward to taking questions and also to continue the dialogue on TTIP and culture. I am very interested in dialogue with different TTIP stakeholders. It might be companies, NGOs, my colleagues from other member states, parliamentarians, but also, of course, cultural institutions and artists. And I hope you will keep participating in these debates. And I also hope that I have provided just a few arguments for the fact that a few trade agreement between the EU and the United States will not deliver a death blow to Europe's creative industries, and it will not deliver a death blow to our cultural diversity, but it will give possibilities for economic development and more jobs, both in Europe and in the US, which is to the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much.